I hunger, coward. I hunger.
In the early days of video games, one of the most commonly used settings was space. It was easy to create because you never had to really design or program any sort of background art. Just keep a black screen, maybe a few dots, boom, you got space. While there were many games that took place in this setting, there is none so prominent, so suspenseful, so frightening than Sinistar. When the game begins, you are dropped immediately into the action. You play as a miner. Your job, to mine these planetoids, but if you mine them too fast, you might not get any resources from them, so you have to do it somewhat slowly. And while you don't know it, you are actually on a bit of a timer, so you have to make good use of what time you've got. Once you gather the crystals, they get converted into Cini-bombs. No, not that awesome cinnamon bun franchise. Bombs made of these crystallized Cini energy. There are other miners flying about as well, and they can collect the resources you've produced, which creates sort of a mad scramble to get it back. You have to hunt them down before they deliver it to their base. And they're not building bombs. Oh no. They're building him. In addition to that, you have warrior spaceships, which can outmaneuver you and even fire at you. But they're mainly a distraction. The real threat is Sinistar. See, once the workers grab enough crystals, they complete Sinistar, a maniacal, evil spaceship of pure death, who can outfly you, who can outgun you, who can only be destroyed by the very bombs that are of the same makeup as he is. This creates an interesting duality in gameplay. You can either try and get as far away from Sinistar as possible before he's created, and just try and get as high a score as possible, building up your bomb supply and lives, and just hope you've prepared enough to take him down when he comes for you. Or you can take the fight to him, try and find his location, and slowly destroy him as he's being built. The problem with this is that you're only delaying the inevitable. And by mining near Sinistar, the workers will have a lot less farther to travel in order to build him. Which means if a worker grabs the crystals you've mined, you have to haul ass even faster to take them down. But you can slowly destroy Sinistar as he's being built, thus allowing you to live longer. That's the brilliance of the gameplay. Do you decide to try and hole up and just try and wait for the inevitable and try and hold it off when you can? Or do you take the fight to them and hope that you can delay it long enough that you can survive when it happens? Choice is up to you. There are 4 zones in this game, each one having different amounts of planetoids and enemies. And it varies the gameplay a little bit, because you have to deal with having less resources and more enemies about. But regardless of what zone you're in, the difficulty will always ramp up. You have to be prepared for it. The controls are fairly simple. You control your directions with the joystick. You also have your gun, which will be used to shoot up the enemies that appear, as well as the other workers. You also have a dedicated bomb button, which will be used to drop your Cini-bombs once you've collected them. The presentation is quite nice. Everything is fairly detailed. Despite how minimalist the background of space is, it really does emphasize the characters. And I know that sounds crazy because there really aren't too many characters. There's you, which I would argue is hardly a character, and then there's Sinistar. Now, while everything else is fairly minimalist in its design, Sinistar is fairly detailed, being comprised of several individual parts that all come together to create one very frightening, evil, giant monstrosity of a spaceship. Now, the sound design is rather effective as well. It keeps the feeling of the void that is space by not having background music. There are sound effects. You can hear your shot, which sounds fairly powerful. But here's where the brilliance of the sound design comes in. This game uses digitized speech for Sinistar. Sinistar will break the silence. He will taunt you, he will insult you, and he will scream at you. And it's used to an amazing extent. The lack of audio from the rest of the game just sort of emphasizes the character that is Sinistar. You know he's evil, you know he's angry, and you know he's coming for you. And this is punctuated by the fact that there is very little sound, but the fact that this monstrosity can pierce the silence of the void really does convey his power and his strength and how very much you don't want to be anywhere near him. The reason this game is so memorable is because of Sinistar. He is a brilliant antagonist. Space is a very, very quiet and lonely place. Even so, you don't have the luxury of enjoying the quiet because you're on a timer, preparing for the inevitable. Until
I hunger, coward.
And once it happens, you know you've run out of time. He can outrun you, and all you can hope to do is try and evade him long enough to take him down. All the while, he will be hunting you, toying with you, insulting you, hoping to intimidate you and knock you off your game. And that's why Sinistar is just such a brilliant antagonist. Also, he is goddamn scary. Replayability mainly stems from the classic arcade mentality of eating your quarters. You want to get the highest score? You keep plugging away. There's a little bit more to it than just that. There's the sheer satisfaction of defeating Sinistar. If you can blow him up just once, that is a very satisfying feeling. Just because he's such a prominent and strong antagonist, that defeating him really feels like an accomplishment. If you can find an arcade machine of Sinistar, you have got to play it because it is an experience. A fairly basic one, to be sure, but it's still a good game. For console, you can pick it up on about 11 different Midway or Williams Arcade compilations, and they're available on pretty much every console. The most recent that I know of is the Midway Arcade Origins game for the PS3 and 360. And none of them at this point should be terribly expensive. Shouldn't be too hard of a game to find. But before you go out there and challenge Sinistar, I have one very crucial warning to give you.
Beware, I live.
What he said.